Hello, everybody. I hope everyone's doing well today. My name is Stacy Carpool. I'm the Executive Director with Bucks County Audubon Society. And welcome to our next Lunch and Learn series, all about birds. We're really excited about this one. We've got some great talks about things that can impact birds, but also hopefully some really positive things that we can all do to help birds and make their lives a little bit better. So today is our first one. Today we're talking about climate change and the impact on birds. There's been a lot of great research on it. So as our speaker today, we have our very own Marissa Jacobs. So Marissa, why don't you go ahead and take it away?
Okay, let's get this shared. What? That advanced. Okay. There we go. So today we are going to be going over the National Audubon Society's climate report, which they titled Survival by Degrees. And as you can see in the little bottom corner, it was published in 2019. So there are some places where it says this is brand new. Even in the science world, having it be 2 years old is still relatively new. So this is still something that's fresh and is still exciting. We've got some takeaways to go over. First, kind of to give you a summary of what the Survival by Degrees report says and how it can be used. So the first takeaway is that 2/3 of North American bird species are at risk of extinction from climate change. Kind of a no good, discouraging fact, but the good news is that science shows that taking action now can improve the chances for 76% of those bird species. So this may sound depressing and a little discouraging, but there is hope, there is light at the end of the tunnel. The third takeaway is that this report looked at 9 different climate threats facing birds. And this was kind of the first time that this report came out, that this report showed these various threats to birds. 305 bird species are going to face 3 or more climate threats at a 3 degrees Celsius rise in temperature. And we'll get more into what that means and how it relates to the report. And that 34 bird species will face those 3 or more climate threats at only a 1.5 degree change. Overall, every is going to experience some kind of impact. And to be honest, everything in the world is going to experience some kind of impact. This is known, from frogs to birds to people. Climate change exists and it impacts us all. 1/4 of the state birds also can lose the majority of their range in at least one season, whether it's summer or winter, at a 3 degree change. But again, going back to the positives, finding those silver linings, not only do scientists know that, hey, if we take action, we can make a change for the better, but we already know what we have to do to protect these birds. So we know that there's actions we can take. And not only that, but in COVID times, we're all at home. We feel like maybe there's not stuff that we can do. But fortunately, those personal actions are things that we can do from the safety of our home. We can do them at home. We can share these ideas with friends and have them do it at home. So we can address these changes that need to be made and move forward to protect the birds we love. Then we go into, what is your personal bird story? And for me, one of the reasons that I am in this field is because as a kid, I grew up in the woods of the Pocono Mountains and in this beautiful home with huge windows. And you can already probably figure out where I'm going by the fact that I say huge windows. And one thing that I really remember is I would go outside and my parents encouraged my love and my curiosity of nature. And when there would be a bird strike on those huge, beautiful windows, I would put on my little disposable gloves and I'd go out and I would get the chance to look up close at these birds, at their wings, at their itty bitty little beaks, at their amazing little tiny feet with their tiny little claws. And it may seem kind of morbid that I would be investigating these birds after they have expired, but it really helped to foster my love and curiosity for nature and helped me also realize that wow, the animals that I love, that I'm interested in, they need protecting. They need some sort of conservation, as I would find these birds that fell on the deck after they died. So that definitely helped me get into the field of wildlife conservation and ecology. So there's that. But any connection that you can make to birds is a little conversation piece to help spur you forward to help to make a change for the birds you love. So now let's get into the science of this report. And overall, we've got massive, massive, massive amounts of data. And the more numbers, the more data that you have, the better the predictions and the finer details you can have. So this report, when you see the maps in future slides, it's down to 1 kilometer of a little data range. So we can really zoom in and figure out community data like Bucks County or the Poconos or California, wherever. Canada and Mexico are included too. But 70 different sources, including eBird, were used to collect all of these data points. So if you have ever used eBird before 2019, your data that you submitted was included in this report, which is kind of a cool feeling. You helped to contribute to science. And then they added threats, these 9 climate threats. They were able to take the bird population numbers from the data, these 9 new threats, which include things like heat waves or fires, early springs, sea level changes, things like that, and add them to bird distribution maps in order to identify change. And this is the first time that something like that has been done. So these scientific models are very exciting to have. Shortly after this climate change report came out, very, very soon after, Science also had a study that they posted how 3 billion birds, and that's not million, that's not thousand, that's billion birds have been lost since 1970. So within the past 50 years, that's a tragic number of birds that have been lost. But Audubon wants to kind of pivot from the past, from looking at past data to looking towards the future and finding out how we can make a change. And sometimes the future can be a little bit alarming with what their models predict. This little snapshot here, you can see the map on the side. It is kind of just a snapshot in time of 140 million observations from those 70 data points. And those, the data can include things, like I said, from eBird, or you see down at the bottom the various records from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service or from the North American Breeding Bird Survey. And again, this is kind of a big deal because this is the first time all of those numbers have been put together and overlaid with that climate threat information. So we have new and exciting. I keep saying it's new and exciting. It's a big deal. But why? And we are looking at variables that talk about climate. So looking at how the temperature is changing over time. We're looking at human land use. Is it urban? Is it rural? Is it farmland? To vegetation, what sort of biome are these birds in? Is it Arctic? Is it eastern deciduous forest? Is it tropical? And then looking at those groups and finding specific variables inside of that. Now, for the Survival by Degrees report, I'm going to be mentioning some different scenarios that these scientific models are going to predict. So we have a 1.5 degree Celsius change or a 2.7 Fahrenheit change. That is considered kind of the goal. We know climate change is happening. We can't stop it at this point, but we can mitigate it, slow it, and then stay at that level. So this is what the world, the global community has come together to say, this is what we want to stay at. So whenever I say the 1.5 degree change, know that that is a 2.7 degree Fahrenheit change. And that is the best case scenario and the lowest amount of temperature change that the world thinks that we can do. There's also a 2 degrees Celsius or 3.6 degrees Fahrenheit change. That's real bad. If we do nothing, that is probably going to happen by 2050. And then there's the 3 degrees change or the 5.4 degree Fahrenheit change. And again, if we do nothing, that is scheduled to happen or predicted to happen by the turn of the century. We don't want that 3 degrees Celsius change to happen. If that happens, that's very extreme, and that puts so many species, not just birds, but humans as well, in dire straits. So we don't want that to happen, but keeping it at that 1.5 degree is kind of the end goal here. But for the future, for the maps that we look at, we're going to be taking a look at that 1.5 degree and 3 degree change scenario. You are also going to see maps like this that talk about the current range and the projections. So again, you can see projections for that 1.5 degree and that 3 degree change. And you can see how their range, the bird's range, is going to shift. Audubon in this study looked at both the summer and the winter ranges for these specific birds and combined the population observations with environmental factors and those climate threats to create the models. For the wood thrush here, you see the little red is showing the range that they lose. Our goal is to keep it at that 1.5 degrees Celsius, which means that they are going to be losing some range, but the blue at the top is range that they are going to gain as well. And they seem, for the most part, stable. However, if nothing is done and we just let things go, they are going to lose so much of their range that they will now be considered climate vulnerable. Not all birds are created equal and will be equally impacted by climate change. Like I said before, there's 9 different climate threats here and all sorts of different variables that are on these birds. So we can take a look at kind of where they live and what their habitat requirements are to be able to figure out how vulnerable birds will be to climate change. And you can see, for example, the Arctic species, they are 100% vulnerable with the caps melting. Their habitat is definitely disappearing. Whereas your more generalist species that can flip from one area to another, they're not going to be impacted in the same ways as other birds are. So this graph here shows that 2/3 of the bird population are climate vulnerable, whereas only 1/3 is considered to be not climate vulnerable. But again, we'll get into some of the actions that you can take to protect these birds. Big picture, for much of this, we are going to be taking a look at North America and the continental United States in general, as opposed to Bucks County specifics. So here we can see the North American maps from Canada all the way down through Central America to Mexico. And you can see that birds are going to be moving over time. Overall, 101 bird species are going to shift north. And you can kind of see in the map, you've got that blue at the very top is brighter, is bolder. You also see there's more red, but 101 species are going to be shifting their ranges north. Well, that's not necessarily a problem when you think, oh, their range is just shifting. They're not just disappearing. But when you think about it on the big picture, eventually you can only go so far north before you're going south again. And that's not what the birds want to do. And if everybody is moving their ranges north, eventually there's not going to be enough space for all of these birds. There's going to be birds that are out competing each other, and you're going to see massive losses in bird population. These here are the 9 climate threats that this report takes a look at. And they can be split into 2 categories. We have the first category, which is the permanent category. And that's going to include your water level rise, whether it's in the sea or in the Great Lakes, and urbanization and cropland expansion. These 3 things make permanent impacts on bird habitats, whereas the other ones of the spring heat, drought, fall springs, the heavy rains, or increased fire weather, those are intermittent. They happen seasonally. And all birds are impacted by those threats differently. And we can see these maps here show the orange is the 1.5 degree scenario, and the red is the 3 degree scenario. So you can see sea level rise and lake level changes is mostly going to be seen at that 1.5 degree change. And a bird that would be impacted by this might be your American widgeon, who is a water bird that needs those sorts of habitats. They would be very impacted by the Great Lake changes. We have cropland expansion, which is one of the few that is worse at the 1.5 degree scenario than it is at the 3 degree scenario. And that's mainly because right now we're trying, as humans, we're trying to figure out what are we going to do for food? Oh, we need to create more food sources. And we're going to expand our agricultural programs. However, if the temperature rises so much that we're now in that 3 degrees Celsius scenario, we're not going to be able to maintain those practices anymore. Cropland is going to be unviable. Our crops are going to fail, and we're going to have to figure out new ways to get those food sources. So we're going to be reducing the amount of expansion that happens. Then we have urbanization, which is going to happen kind of regardless. And that's mainly because as those food sources kind of fail, they dry up, humans are going to be moving closer to cities. So, for example, Bucks County is kind of in one of those areas that might be built up more. We're outside of Philadelphia, close enough that we can commute to the city if needed, but far enough away that there is space for people to move into. So that is going to be impacting how the land is used in this area. It's going to be overdeveloped. And a bird that might be impacted by that would be the wood thrush. They need the forests, the understory, and as more people move in and develop that woodland area, they're losing their habitat. We can move on to extreme spring heat, which impacts birds in the fact that, yay, we have our nice little cute nests that we get to enjoy watching as the moms make them and put all the sticks together. And some people have them in their flower pots outside their door. And it's always so exciting when we find eggs and the eggs hatch. But with the extreme spring heat, these undeveloped chicks don't have the ability to protect themselves yet from that extra heat. So we're going to see that, yeah, the eggs may be laid, but do they all survive? Maybe not. Then we move into fire weather, and that does impact out west a little bit more, but we've been seeing in the news the past how many years? How many more reports of wildfires are out there? Then we have heavy rains, which impact plant growth. And if birds don't have the plants or the insects emergence that they need for food sources, they don't have their food. That's no good. And that goes along with the spring droughts as well, vice versa. It's just the other end of the spectrum. And again, with the false springs. Another bird that could be impacted by the extra rain or a rising in sea levels could be your piping plover. We think of in New Jersey, we have our adorable little shore birds. And as the sea level rises or there's extra rain that's washing some of their habitat away, they're losing their nesting grounds. And this is an already endangered species. Now to add this climate threat on top of them, they're really in a pickle and need our help. Here you can see kind of the cumulative threats of one threat per square mile is what's on the graph, and how if we can stay at that 1.5 scenario, most 98% of the continental United States will only have one, maybe two climate threats in one area. Whereas if we do nothing and just let it keep going, let climate change have its way, most birds then are going to be impacted at such a higher rate. It's no longer just one or two threats that's on them now. It's 3, 4, 5, even 6 of those 9 threats are going to be on bird species at once. Overall, again, hashing on the same point here, that 1.5 degree change, that is our goal. Only 20% of species are going to be facing, if we go back to that map, this is just kind of showing the same thing, but in a different way that we just saw. But we want to keep it that 1.5 range so that we reduce the amount of climate threats that these birds face. Then we have how do conservationists, how do scientists take this information and run with it? What are we supposed to do with this? And we can take a look at risk assessment and risk maps. Overall, risk just is an index that indicates priority areas for conservation efforts. And we can find the risk by taking the product of the number of birds in a location, the number of vulnerable species, and the number of threats for that location. And this gives us kind of this priority of what is the most important area to focus our conservation efforts on. So for the breeding birds or the non-breeding birds, we're going to have different priorities. And you can see the breeding population in Pennsylvania is a little more of a priority than the non-breeding population. So this kind of helps us to take a look at where conservation efforts are going to be the most valuable. So that's a whole bunch of science. That's a whole bunch of craziness. But how can this be made personal to us? All of that data, Audubon was able to take that data, take those scientific models, and create a kind of really cool web tool for everyone. And this is a screenshot. I'm going to be showing a whole bunch of screenshots of it, but of how we can really look at our community, very specifically our community down to the kilometer, and be able to see what climate threats are here, what birds are vulnerable, what are the priorities, and learn how to take action for that community. All you need is your zip code, the state, either one, depending on how broad you want to look, and then your email address, and the report will be sent to you. So this is another screenshot of what you might see in that report that gets sent back to you. You can actually look up the specific birds. If you are really excited about the American goldfinch and you love that you see these little birds in the summer and you want to figure out, will I continue to see those little birds in the summer in Bucks County? You may see that their range is shifting farther north, and eventually they're not going to be in Bucks County if we don't do anything. So please do things, because they're my favorite. But this kind of focuses here, just gives you an example of the winter wren. You can see its current range, you can see the 1.5 scenario and the 3-degree scenario. You can see how the range is going to be moving over time, and even throughout the year of if this is an all seasons, breeding season, winter, or a migration season for each of these specific birds that you care about. You can also zoom in. So this is zoomed in on the Pennsylvania area and surrounding states, so New Jersey, New York, and Ohio a little bit. And it can show you the various climate threats in that area. So you can take a look at, oh, wow, Pennsylvania has a lot of climate threats. It's got like 3 climate threats in most of the places. Then it gets into the 1s and 2s down in the southern end of the state. And then even what those specific threats are. Again, you can look at the movement over time, and it'll actually play for you. If you click on the different scenarios, it's like a nice little moving map there. It's very interactive and fun to take a look at, even not in your area, just to see what some cool birds are doing and how they're moving and reacting to climate change. And also you can see priority birds. And these priority birds are the ones that are on that high end of the climate vulnerable, as well as on specific watch lists around the world. Another fun little screenshot for you to kind of get an idea of what you might see if you go on. So again, I don't like ending on sad, depressing notes, but I really want to show everyone that how important our action is. 2/3 of North American birds are at risk of extinction from climate change. This is really bad. And this is by, if you look at those scientific models, this is all by 2050. That's only in 30 years. That's not a lot of time. But we can do something about it. This is not a hopeless, just discouraging, depressing presentation I'm giving. This, I hope, to be one of hope, that you see what we have to protect. Not only has Audubon created this super cool survival by degrees report that we can take a look at and really get to know the details of all the birds, but they've also put together this kind of, let's just start here, but it's start here for ways and ideas to advocate for the birds that you love. And these are your at-home tips and ideas. Obviously, voting is really important. I'm sure many people are really aware of that and very conscientious of the importance of voting for the environmental policies right now and voting for the birds. We've seen how the Migratory Bird Treaty Act has kind of been bashed to pieces. And if we're going to be protecting the birds and preventing that extinction, we need to be alert and ready to speak for the birds and to talk to our legislators. Telling Congress, that's a local action that we can do. We can send letters, write emails, and tell them to stop stripping away those protections that have been placed on birds. Spreading the word that having a conversation with your friend, that's free. That's not a time commitment. You don't have to spend a lot of money or spend all of your time advocating for birds. But it's a little thing that you can do from home that makes a huge difference. And joining the Bucks County Audubon Society, we have numerous ways that you can help local bird populations. For example, we have a wonderfully active advocacy committee that writes letters to the editor, sets up emails to different congressmen and legislatures, folks. We have community science programs. For example, we have a Nest Watch program going on in February that you can volunteer with that takes a look at our bluebird populations and all sorts of things. So from advocacy committee to the community science committee to just helping to support the efforts that we do as well, that's a huge help locally. We have our contact info up here. So if you are interested in joining our advocacy committee or learning more about our community science efforts, you can definitely get in contact with us. We have our social media up here as well. And I do also want to add that we have an iNaturalist project for our property. So if you come and take a look and spend some time in the bird blind, or go to the pond or the marsh and you see different birds along your way, document that in iNaturalist. And that helps us be able to see what birds are here. What is their population like? And when? How are they moving? Are we seeing a weird number of summer birds sticking around for longer periods of time? And it really helps us be able to create our own little data set here as well. Plus, it's just cool to see all the wonderful biodiversity that we have on the property. So again, if you are here taking pictures on the property, please be sure to add them to iNaturalist. It is a free app that you can put on your phone. But I would open it up for questions. Please feel free to email any questions that you may have. My personal work email is mjacobs, Jacobs, at bcis.org if you have any questions about this as well. I would love to chat with you, or you can get in contact with us on our social media. But thank you so much for your time.
All righty. Thank you so much, Marissa. That was wonderful. Lots of great information, but also some great things that hopefully everyone can keep in mind about what they can do as well. And that's really what the whole purpose of this series is about. Finding ways that we can help birds. Next week, we're going to be focusing on nest boxes and how to create them for your yard to help birds both as winter roosts and obviously during breeding season, which will be coming up way faster than we think it will probably. So that should be a great presentation as well. So hopefully everyone will join us. And again, thank you all so much for your time. All righty, and we're done. Nice job, Marissa.
Thanks.